I'm 57 years old now, and I've learned that some wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people whose approval you've spent your whole life chasing. My name is Margaret Sullivan, though most people call me Maggie, and this is the story of how my brother's cruelest words became the catalyst for the most important transformation of my life. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I want to hear your stories too, because I believe we're all connected by the struggles we face and the strength we find when we think, we have nothing left. Let me take you back to where it all began, not to the emergency, call that changed everything, but to the slow, painful unraveling that came before it. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when my brother Daniel said the words that would echo in my mind for months to come. We were standing in his pristine kitchen in Westchester County, New York, surrounded by granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that probably cost more than my annual rent. His wife, Vanessa, stood behind him with her arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her designer blouse. Their 2 children, Emma and Jacob, were upstairs doing homework, blissfully unaware that their aunt was about to be excommunicated from their lives. "Maggie, I think it's best if you stay out of my kids' lives from now on," Daniel said, his voice cold and measured, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed. I stood there holding the birthday present I'd brought for Emma, a handmade scrapbook filled with photos and memories from her childhood. My hand started shaking, and I had to set it down on the counter before I dropped it. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He glanced at Vanessa, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod, as if granting permission to continue. "You're not exactly the role model I want for Emma and Jacob. You're 55 years old. You're still renting that tiny apartment in Queens. You work as a seamstress making what? Barely enough to get by? I mean, look at yourself, Maggie. What kind of example are you setting for my children?" Each word was a knife, carefully aimed and thrust with precision. But he wasn't finished. "Emma's at a critical age. She needs to understand the value of education, ambition, real success, not—" He gestured vaguely at me. "Whatever it is you've been doing with your life. And Jacob, he's starting to ask questions about why his aunt doesn't have a real career, why you're always struggling. It's embarrassing, honestly." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Daniel, I've been part of their lives since they were born. I've babysat them, helped with homework, taken them to the park every Sunday when you were too busy." "That's exactly the problem," Vanessa interjected, her voice sharp. "You've had too much influence. Emma came home last week saying she wanted to learn to sew like Aunt Maggie, that she didn't care about getting straight A's anymore because doing what you love is more important. Do you see the issue here?" "God forbid a child wants to explore creativity," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It's not about creativity," Daniel snapped. "It's about you filling their heads with your small-minded thinking. You settled for less, Maggie. You always have. Mom and Dad spent money on your education, and what did you do? You dropped out of college after 2 years to pursue some romantic notion of being an artist. Well, look where that got you. I'm not letting you drag my children down the same path of mediocrity." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter for support. "I came here to celebrate Emma's birthday. I made her a gift with my own hands, something personal and meaningful." "We don't need your charity," Vanessa said coldly. "Daniel provides more than adequately for his family. What Emma needs are gifts that have actual value, not sentimental trinkets." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and barely recognized the boy I'd grown up with. The Daniel I remembered used to defend me on the playground, used to sneak cookies into my room when I was grounded, used to tell me I was talented and special. When did he become this person? When did success turn him into someone who measured worth in dollar signs and job titles? "Is this really how you feel?" I asked him directly, hoping to see some flicker of the brother I once knew. He straightened his tie, a habit he'd developed over years of corporate meetings and power plays. "This is about what's best for my family, Maggie. You need to respect that. I'm asking you, no, I'm telling you, to keep your distance. No more Sunday visits, no more birthday parties, no more filling their heads with your perspective on life." "They're my niece and nephew," I said, tears now streaming down my face. "I love them." "Then love them enough to let them have a chance at real success," he replied. "Without your influence." I grabbed my purse with trembling hands and left the scrapbook on the counter. As I walked toward the door, I heard Emma's voice from upstairs. "Is that Aunt Maggie?" "I thought she was coming for my birthday." Vanessa called up. "She had to leave, sweetie. She won't be visiting anymore." I nearly collapsed on their front steps. The September air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves and distant chimney smoke. I sat there in the gathering darkness, crying so hard I could barely breathe. A neighbor walking her dog gave me a concerned look, but kept walking. This was Westchester, after all, where people minded their own business and kept their problems behind closed doors. The drive back to Queens was a blur. I don't remember getting on the highway or navigating through traffic. I just remember sitting in my car outside my apartment building, looking up at the small window that represented my entire living space, and feeling like the failure Daniel had accused me of being. Before I continue, I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever felt like you weren't enough? Like no matter what you did, someone important in your life saw you as a disappointment? Drop a comment and let me know. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone in these feelings makes all the difference. The weeks following that devastating conversation were some of the darkest of my life. I threw myself into work at the small tailor shop where I'd been employed for nearly 15 years. But even the familiar rhythm of needle and thread couldn't quiet the voices in my head. Daniel's voice, mostly, echoing his judgment over and over: mediocre, small-minded, embarrassing. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The other seamstresses at work, most of whom were immigrants working 2 or 3 jobs to support families back home. Were we all failures? Mrs. Chen, who could create a perfect replica of a designer dress just by looking at a photograph, was she mediocre because she worked with her hands? Or Carlos, whose embroidery was so exquisite that wealthy clients from Manhattan came specifically to request his work, was he an embarrassment to his family? The shop owner, Mr. Goldstein, noticed my distraction. He was 78 years old, a Holocaust survivor who had rebuilt his life in America from nothing. One afternoon, as I sat at my station, mindlessly hemming a pair of pants, he pulled up a chair beside me. "Margaret," he said in his gentle, accented voice, "for 30 years I've owned this shop. I know when one of my people is hurting. You want to talk about it?" I looked up at his kind, weathered face, a face that had seen more hardship than I could imagine, and broke down. The whole story came pouring out, Daniel's words, the banishment from my niece and nephew's lives, the feeling that maybe he was right. Maybe I had wasted my life. Mr. Goldstein listened without interruption. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his arthritic fingers absently smoothing a piece of fabric on the table. "You know what the Nazis took from me?" he finally said. "Everything. My family, my home, my youth. When I came to America, I had nothing, not even the language. I learned to sew because it was work I could get without perfect English. Your brother, he would say I'm a failure, yes? Just a tailor in Queens?" "Mr. Goldstein, no, I didn't mean—" He held up a hand. "Let me finish. What your brother doesn't understand, what many people don't understand, is that value isn't measured in money alone. You know what I learned in the camps? That a man who could sew a button could trade that skill for an extra piece of bread. That skill, that knowledge, it kept me alive. After the war, it gave me purpose. It let me build this business, raise 3 children, send them all to university. My daughter? She's a doctor. My sons? One's a lawyer, one's a professor. They don't look down on their father's work. They understand that my hands built the foundation for their success." His words struck something deep inside me. "But Daniel, your brother is scared," Mr. Goldstein said simply. "Scared that if his children see there are different ways to measure success, different ways to live a meaningful life, they might not follow his path, might not validate his choices. That's his fear, Margaret, not your failure." I wanted to believe him, but Daniel's words had burrowed too deep. Over the next few weeks, I became a ghost of myself. I stopped eating properly. Why cook a real meal for one person in a tiny kitchen? I stopped going to the library on Saturdays, stopped taking my morning walks, stopped returning calls from the few friends I had. Depression wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, making even simple tasks feel insurmountable. My landlord, Mrs. Rodriguez, knocked on my door one evening. She was a widow in her 70s who owned the building and lived on the first floor. "Mija," she said when I finally opened the door, "I haven't heard your sewing machine in weeks. You haven't taken out your trash. I'm worried about you." I tried to reassure her, but she pushed past me into my apartment and immediately began opening windows. "This place smells like sadness," she declared. "And you look like you haven't eaten in days. Come downstairs. I made arroz con pollo, enough to feed an army. I didn't have the energy to argue." In her warm, cluttered kitchen, surrounded by photos of her late husband and their children and grandchildren, I picked at the food on my plate while she studied me. "Man trouble?" she asked. "Brother trouble?" I replied, and found myself telling the story again. Mrs. Rodriguez listened, occasionally nodding, her hands busy with crocheting. She was always making something. Blankets for a homeless shelter, hats for premature babies at the hospital. When I finished, she set down her crochet hook and looked at me seriously. "You know what your problem is?" she said. "You're letting someone else write your story. This brother of yours, he's not God. He doesn't get to decide your worth. Only you decide that." "But what if he's right?" I whispered. "What if I did waste my life? I could have been a teacher or a nurse or something respectable. Instead, I'm just what? Just a woman who creates beauty with her hands? Just someone who takes a piece of fabric and turns it into something that makes people feel confident and beautiful? You think that's nothing?" She picked up her crocheting again, her needles clicking rhythmically. "My husband, God rest his soul, he was a janitor. Cleaned office buildings for 40 years. You think he wasn't proud of his work? He kept those buildings spotless. He took pride in every floor he mopped, every window he cleaned. He raised 4 children and sent them all to college on a janitor's salary. Tell me that's not success. Tell me that's not respectable. If you're watching this, I hope you're finding something in this story that speaks to you. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need reminding that our worth isn't determined by someone else's yardstick. But even Mrs. Rodriguez's wisdom couldn't pull me out of the darkness. October turned to November, and I became more isolated. I went through the motions at work, arriving on time, completing my assignments, but my heart wasn't in it. The joy I'd always found in creating something with my hands had evaporated. I stopped checking my phone, so I missed the calls from my friend Linda, who I'd known since high school. I missed the messages from my cousin Rachel. I missed the concerned email from Emma's teacher, who wanted to know if I was okay because Emma had been asking about me. The only reason I knew about that last one was because Mr. Goldstein showed me the email. Apparently, Emma's mother had contacted the school to make sure I had no further contact with Emma, and the teacher, confused by the situation, had reached out to the shop because she had my business card from a school fashion show I'd helped with the previous year. "The girl misses you," Mr. Goldstein said gently. "Her teacher says she's been withdrawn in class, not participating like she used to." The news hit me like a physical blow. My absence was hurting Emma, but what could I do? Daniel had made his position clear. I was toxic, a bad influence, someone to be kept away from his precious children. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Westchester and parked down the street from Daniel's house. I just wanted to see them, to catch a glimpse of Emma and Jacob, to know they were okay. It was pathetic and borderline stalking, but I couldn't help myself. I watched through the large front windows as they sat around the dinner table. Vanessa was on her phone, Daniel was reading something on a tablet. Emma was pushing food around her plate with her head down. And Jacob was talking animatedly about something, though no one seemed to be listening. From the outside, they looked like the perfect successful family. From my vantage point in my beat-up Honda Civic, I could see the cracks. A tap on my window made me jump. A police officer stood there, flashlight in hand. I rolled down my window, my heart hammering. "Ma'am, we got a call about a suspicious vehicle in the neighborhood. Can I see your license and registration?" As I fumbled for my documents, I saw Vanessa standing on the front porch, arms crossed, phone in hand. She'd called the police on me. The officer ran my information and came back. "Mrs. Sullivan, the homeowner says you've been told to stay away from the property. Is that correct?" The humiliation burned through me. "I'm his sister," I said weakly. "I just wanted to see my niece and nephew." "I understand, ma'am, but you need to leave now. If you come back, she can file for a restraining order. Do you understand?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw Daniel come out onto the porch. Even from a distance, I could see his angry expression. I'd become the crazy aunt, the family embarrassment who had to be kept away by police intervention. That was my rock bottom. December came, bringing with it the holiday season, normally my favorite time of year. I'd always been the one to organize family gatherings, to bake cookies and make decorations, to choose thoughtful, handmade gifts for everyone. This year, I couldn't even bring myself to put up a small Christmas tree. The shop closed for a week over the holidays, and I spent Christmas Day alone in my apartment, eating a TV dinner and watching old movies. My phone rang once, my cousin Rachel, but I didn't answer. What would I say? That I'd become exactly what Daniel accused me of being. A lonely, unsuccessful woman with nothing to show for her 55 years on Earth? On New Year's Eve, Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on my door again. This time she didn't ask permission to enter. She just walked in with a bag of groceries and started cooking. "Enough," she said firmly. "You've mourned long enough. Tomorrow is a new year, and you're going to start living again, whether you want to or not." "I don't see the point," I said listlessly from my position on the couch, where I'd spent most of the past week. She turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand, and fixed me with a look that reminded me of my own mother. "The point? Misha, you're breathing, aren't you? That's the point. Every day you wake up is another chance to write a different story. Mrs. Rodriguez, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but nothing. You think you're the only person who's ever been rejected by family? Who's ever felt like a failure? Let me tell you something about failure. My husband and I came to this country with nothing. We cleaned houses, we worked in factories, we did whatever we had to do. Our oldest son, he was ashamed of us. Wouldn't bring friends home because our English wasn't perfect, because we didn't have the right kind of furniture or the right kind of clothes. He changed his last name. Can you believe that? Didn't want to be Rodriguez anymore, wanted something that sounded more American. That hurt worse than anything. I sat up, surprised. I'd never heard this story. What happened? He grew up, she said simply. Took him 20 years, but he grew up. Realized that the parents he was ashamed of were the same parents who sacrificed everything so he could go to college, so he could have opportunities we never had. He came back, apologized, changed his name back. Now he's the first one to tell people where he came from, what his parents did for him. She paused, stirring whatever was in the pot. But here's the thing, Mija. Even when he was gone, even when he rejected us, we didn't stop living. We didn't stop being proud of who we were and what we built. You understand what I'm telling you? I did, intellectually, but emotionally I was still stuck. It's different when it's your own brother. When you've spent your whole life looking up to someone, and then they tell you you're worthless. He didn't say you're worthless. He said you're not the success he wants you to be. Those are different things. She brought over 2 bowls of soup and sat beside me on the couch. Eat, then we're going to talk about what you're going to do next. There is no next, I said, but I took the soup. It was the first real food I'd had in days, and my body responded gratefully. There's always a next, Mrs. Rodriguez insisted. You can sit here and rot, or you can prove your brother wrong. Which is it going to be? If you're still with me, thank you. I know this is a long story, but I promise you, the darkness doesn't last forever. If you're going through something similar right now, please hold on. Please keep watching, and please subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey. January brought a cold snap that left ice on the windows and frost in the air that burned your lungs when you breathed too deeply. But it also brought something I didn't expect: clarity. Mrs. Rodriguez's words stayed with me. So did Mr. Goldstein's, and late one sleepless night, I found myself thinking about all the skills I'd accumulated over my lifetime. Not just sewing, but pattern making, design, embroidery, alterations, costume creation. I thought about the clients who'd sought me out specifically because of my work, who'd referred their friends to me, who'd trusted me with their wedding dresses and graduation suits and special occasion outfits. I thought about a conversation I'd had years ago with a client named Jennifer, who'd come to me in tears because she'd gained weight and none of her clothes fit anymore. And her husband was pressuring her to lose weight before his company's gala. I'd spent 3 hours with her, not just altering her dress, but talking with her, reassuring her that her worth wasn't determined by a number on a scale. She'd left feeling beautiful and confident, and she'd sent me a thank you card that said I'd changed her life. Was that worthless? Was bringing joy and confidence to someone's life mediocre? I got up and turned on my sewing machine for the first time in months. I didn't have a specific project in mind. I just needed to feel the fabric under my fingers, to remember who I was before Daniel's words had poisoned my self-perception. I made a small quilted wall hanging, working through the night, losing myself in the creative process. As the sun rose on a frigid January morning, I held up my creation, a simple geometric pattern in blues and greens, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: pride. That day, I went back to work with a different mindset. I started paying attention to the business side of the tailor shop, asking Mr. Goldstein questions about overhead costs, profit margins, customer acquisition. He was delighted by my interest. "You know, Margaret," he said one afternoon, "I've been thinking about retirement. My arthritis is getting worse, and my kids keep telling me I should slow down. But I worry about what happens to this place, to the people who work here." An idea began forming in my mind, wild and terrifying and thrilling all at once. "Mr. Goldstein, what if I bought the business from you?" He looked at me with surprise, then thoughtfulness. "You have savings for something like that?" "No," I admitted. "But maybe I could work something out. A payment plan or a partnership or—" I trailed off, realizing how absurd it sounded. What did I know about running a business? But Mr. Goldstein didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Let me think about it. Talk to my accountant, see what might be possible." "You've got good instincts, Margaret. You're good with the customers, good with the work. Maybe you just need a chance to prove what you can do." Over the next few weeks, something shifted in me. I started taking online courses in small business management, free ones, because I couldn't afford anything else. I read books from the library about entrepreneurship and marketing. I began sketching out ideas for how I might expand the shop's services, reach new customers, maybe even teach classes. It was Mrs. Rodriguez who suggested I start an online presence. "My granddaughter, she's always on this Instagram thing, showing her art. You should do that with your sewing. People love to see how things are made." I was skeptical. I could barely work my smartphone, but she brought her granddaughter over one evening, and the two of them set up an Instagram account for me. Sullivan's Stitchery, they called it. My first post was a time-lapse video of me altering a dress, something her granddaughter filmed and edited for me. I got 3 likes, all from family members of Mrs. Rodriguez. But it was a start. February brought Valentine's Day, and with it, a rush of customers wanting alterations for date night outfits and anniversary dinners. I worked overtime, grateful for the distraction and the extra money. But more than that, I started really connecting with customers in a way I hadn't before. There was Sandra, a recently divorced woman in her 40s who needed her entire wardrobe altered because she'd lost weight due to stress. As I pinned and measured, she told me her story: a husband who'd left her for a younger woman, adult children who were angry at her for letting him go, a job she hated but couldn't leave because she needed the insurance. "Some days I don't know why I bother," she said, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "I fix the outside, but inside I'm just broken." I paused, pins in hand, and met her eyes in the mirror. "I understand that feeling more than you know. But you know what? You're here. You're taking care of yourself. You're moving forward even when it's hard. That's not nothing, Sandra. That's courage." She started crying, and we ended up talking for over an hour. When she left, she hugged me tightly and said, "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me." That evening, I thought about what Mr. Goldstein had said about value not being measured in money alone. I'd helped Sandra in a way that had nothing to do with the dress alterations and everything to do with human connection. That was worth something. That mattered. My Instagram account slowly started to grow. Maybe 20, then 30, then 50 followers. Most were people from the neighborhood who'd heard about my work. I started posting not just finished projects, but the process, explaining techniques, sharing the stories behind certain pieces. It was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected, like I was reclaiming my narrative one post at a time. Then, in early March, something unexpected happened. A customer named Patricia came in with an unusual request. She was getting married and wanted a wedding dress made from her grandmother's vintage gown from the 1940s. The dress was in fragile condition, but it was beautiful: delicate lace, detailed beadwork, a style you just don't see anymore. "Every bridal shop I've been to says it can't be done," she said, carefully unfolding the dress from layers of tissue paper. "They say the fabric is too delicate, that it's not worth the risk. But this dress, it's the only thing I have left of my grandmother." She raised me. "I want her to be part of my wedding day." I examined the dress carefully. It would be challenging, no question. The lace was indeed fragile, and several seams had already given way. But it was also extraordinary. The kind of craftsmanship that you rarely see anymore, made by hand in an era before mass production. "I can do it," I heard myself say. "It won't be easy, and it will take time, but I can do it." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You're sure?" I nodded, feeling more certain than I had about anything in months. "Your grandmother made this dress to be worn, to be celebrated. It deserves a second life." I spent weeks working on that dress. It became my passion project, the thing I thought about when I woke up and the last thing I worked on before going to bed. I carefully disassembled the original construction, reinforced every seam, replaced the lining, and rebuilt the dress to fit Patricia's measurements while maintaining every detail of the original design. Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter, Maria, documented the entire process for my Instagram. The posts started getting more engagement. People were fascinated by the transformation of something old and damaged into something new and beautiful. It felt like a metaphor for my own life. April brought spring, and with it, new beginnings. Patricia's wedding dress was finished, and when she came for her final fitting, she cried, happy tears this time. She looked stunning, her grandmother's dress fitting her perfectly, honoring the past while celebrating the future. "You're an artist," she said, turning to see the dress from every angle. "This is museum-quality work." "It's just sewing," I started to say, then caught myself. Why was I diminishing my own skill? Actually, thank you. It was a labor of love, and I'm so glad I could help make your day special. Patricia posted photos of herself in the dress on social media and tagged my account. Suddenly, I had people from all over the tri-state area reaching out, asking about custom work, vintage dress restoration, unique alterations. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mr. Goldstein watched all this with a knowing smile. "Remember when you asked about buying the business?" he said one afternoon. "I talked to my accountant and my lawyer. We worked out a proposal, if you're still interested." My heart raced. "I'm interested, but I don't have much for a down payment." "That's okay. We structure it as a loan. You pay me a percentage of the profits each month. I stay on as a consultant for the first year, help you with the transition. You keep the existing staff, you maintain the quality standards, and the business is yours." He smiled. "I built this place from nothing, Margaret. I'd like to see it go to someone who understands what it really means. Not just money, but craft, pride in work, community." I wanted to say yes immediately, but fear held me back. What if I failed? What if Daniel was right, and I didn't have what it took to succeed on that level? "Take some time, think about it," Mr. Goldstein said. "But don't take too long. I'm not getting any younger." That evening, I sat in my apartment with a notebook, trying to make a list of pros and cons. But my mind kept wandering to Emma and Jacob. I hadn't seen them in 7 months. I wondered if they still thought about me, if they'd moved on, if Daniel had successfully erased me from their lives. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Mrs. Rodriguez holding an envelope. "This came to my apartment by mistake," she said, handing it to me. "Wrong unit number." The return address was from Emma's school. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a drawing, one of those assignments where kids have to illustrate someone who inspires me. Emma had drawn me at my sewing machine with bright colors and careful detail. At the bottom, in her neat handwriting, "My Aunt Maggie inspires me because she makes beautiful things and she always makes people smile. I miss her very much." I collapsed onto my couch, clutching the drawing, sobbing. The assignment was dated 2 weeks earlier. Emma hadn't forgotten me. Despite everything Daniel had said, despite months of separation, I still mattered to her. That drawing became my talisman. I framed it and hung it above my sewing machine. Every time I doubted myself, every time fear threatened to paralyze me, I looked at that picture and remembered why I was doing this. Not to prove Daniel wrong, not anymore. To prove to myself and to show Emma that you can face rejection and still build something meaningful. The next day, I told Mr. Goldstein yes. We'd work out the details, but I was buying the business. May through August was a whirlwind of paperwork, lawyers, bank meetings, and sleepless nights. Mr. Goldstein was true to his word, staying on to help with the transition and teaching me everything he knew about running the business side of things. Mrs. Chen and Carlos were supportive, excited about the future even though I was terrified I'd somehow let them down. I rebranded the shop as Sullivan's Stitchery and Alterations, investing what little savings I had in a new sign and some updated equipment. I expanded our services to include custom design, vintage restoration, and sewing classes. The classes were Mrs. Rodriguez's idea. She pointed out that people were always asking how I did what I did, so why not teach them and create another revenue stream? The first class had 5 students. The second had 10. By the end of summer, I had a waiting list. My Instagram following grew to over 1,000, then 2,000. I started getting requests for collaborations from local boutiques and even a few small fashion brands who wanted custom work. It was overwhelming and exciting and absolutely exhausting. But here's what I learned during those intense months. When you're working towards something that matters to you, when you're building something with purpose, exhaustion feels different. It's not the soul-crushing fatigue of depression. It's the satisfying tiredness of meaningful work. I also learned that I was capable of far more than I'd ever given myself credit for. Marketing, bookkeeping, inventory management, customer service, scheduling, problem solving, all these skills I'd somehow absorbed over years of working in the shop, but never recognized as skills. Daniel had made me believe I had nothing to offer. Turns out I had plenty. One evening in late August, as I was locking up the shop, a well-dressed woman approached me. She introduced herself as Rebecca Morrison, editor of a regional lifestyle magazine. "I've been following your Instagram," she said. "Your work is exceptional, but more than that, your story is compelling. Would you be interested in being featured in our Local Heroes segment? We like to highlight people who are making a difference in their communities." I almost said no automatically. Who was I to be called a hero? But then I remembered Emma's drawing, remembered Mrs. Rodriguez's words about not letting someone else write my story. "Yes," I said. I'd be honored. The interview took place a week later. Rebecca was kind and perceptive, asking not just about my business, but about my journey, what had motivated me to take this leap. I found myself telling her about Daniel, about hitting rock bottom, about slowly rebuilding my confidence in my life. I didn't use Daniel's name, just referred to him as a family member, but I was honest about the pain and the struggle. What would you say to someone watching this who's been told they're not good enough? Rebecca asked. I thought carefully before answering. I'd say that person gets to decide what good enough means. We spend so much time measuring ourselves against other people's definitions of success that we forget to ask what success means to us. For me, success used to be about making other people proud. Now it's about making work that I'm proud of, building connections that matter, and hopefully inspiring others to pursue their own paths, whatever those might be. The feature was published in October, almost exactly a year after Daniel had banished me from his children's lives. The magazine did a beautiful job. Photos of the shop, of me working, of some of my creations, alongside the interview. They titled it, "From Heartbreak to Healing, How One Woman Turned Rejection into Redemption." I want to pause here and ask you to do something. If this story is resonating with you, if you see yourself in any part of my journey, please subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything, and I want to continue sharing stories that remind us all that we're stronger than we think. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what part of this story speaks to you most. It was a Friday night in late October, just past 11 o'clock. I was working late at the shop, finishing a rush order for a client whose daughter's quinceañera was the next day. The dress had come in damaged from the supplier, and I'd promised to fix it in time. My phone was on silent, tucked away in my purse. I was so focused on the delicate beadwork that I didn't hear it ring. Didn't hear it ring again. Or again. It wasn't until I finally finished, standing up to stretch my aching back, that I saw the notifications. 7 missed calls from an unknown number, 3 voicemails, and then a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Vanessa, Daniel's wife. Call me immediately. It's an emergency." My blood turned to ice. Despite everything, despite the hurt and rejection, Daniel was still my brother. I called back with shaking hands. Vanessa answered on the first ring. "Maggie?" Her voice was different. Small, frightened, none of the usual ice and superiority. "Oh God, Maggie, I didn't know who else to call. What's wrong?" "What happened?" "It's Daniel. Her voice broke. "He collapsed at work. They think it's his heart. He's in surgery right now at Presbyterian Hospital. Emma and Jacob. God, Maggie, they're so scared, and I can't do this alone." Every angry, hurt feeling I'd harbored for the past year evaporated in an instant. "I'm coming." "Which hospital?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove like a maniac through the late-night traffic, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. Please, I thought, please let him be okay. Whatever had happened between us, I couldn't imagine a world without my brother in it. When I burst through the doors of the cardiac ICU waiting room, I saw them immediately. Vanessa, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, her expensive clothes wrinkled. Emma, now 13, curled up on a chair looking so small and scared. And Jacob, 11, trying to be brave but failing, tears streaming down his face. Aunt Maggie. Emma saw me first and launched herself at me. I caught her, holding her tight as she sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." I looked over her head at Vanessa, who was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What do we know?" Vanessa's voice was hoarse from crying. "Massive heart attack. He's been in surgery for 3 hours. They said," she swallowed hard, "they said if his assistant hadn't been there when it happened, if the ambulance had been even 5 minutes later." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Jacob came over and grabbed my hand. "Dad said you weren't allowed to see us anymore. But I'm glad you're here. I missed you." "I missed you too, buddy." I pulled him close with my free arm. "Both of you." So much we waited, hours of waiting, while the clock on the wall ticked away with agonizing slowness. Emma and Jacob fell asleep against me, one on each side. Vanessa sat across from us, her phone clutched in her hand but forgotten. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, quietly, into the silence of the waiting room. "For everything. For that night. For calling the police. For all of it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, fear, humanity. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you and Daniel want me gone?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because you represented everything Daniel was afraid of. He grew up poor, you know. Your parents struggled. He was terrified of ever going back to that, of his children ever experiencing what he experienced. When he saw you, living simply but happily, not driven by the same fears he had, it terrified him. What if the kids decided they didn't need all the things he'd worked so hard to provide? What if they rejected the life he'd built?" "So he rejected me first," I said softly. "Yes." Vanessa wiped her eyes. "And I went along with it because I'm just as shallow and scared as he is. Is." She shook her head. "Emma asked about you every week. Every single week. And I kept making excuses. Aunt Maggie's busy. Aunt Maggie moved away. Aunt Maggie doesn't want to see you." I taught my daughter to lie. "What kind of mother does that?" "A scared one," I said. "We all do things we regret when we're scared." At 4 a.m, a surgeon finally came out. We all jumped to our feet, waking Emma and Jacob. "Mrs. Sullivan?" the surgeon said, looking at Vanessa. "Your husband made it through surgery. It was touch and go, but he's stable now. The next 48 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Vanessa's knees buckled, and I caught her. We held on to each other, two women who'd been enemies just hours before, now united in relief. "Can we see him?" Emma asked in a small voice. "Not yet," the surgeon said kindly. "He's in recovery. Once he's moved to ICU, immediate family can see him briefly, one at a time." "She's immediate family," Vanessa said firmly, gesturing to me. "Daniel's sister. She should be there when he wakes up." They moved Daniel to the cardiac ICU around 6 a.m. He was still unconscious, connected to what seemed like a dozen machines, tubes and wires everywhere. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him. This was the big brother who'd always seemed invincible, who'd climbed the highest trees and faced down bullies and conquered the business world. Now he looked fragile and human. Vanessa went in first, staying for the allotted 10 minutes. When she came out, her face was blotchy from crying. "You go," she said to me. I think he needs to hear your voice." I approached his bedside nervously. A nurse was checking his vitals, making notes on a chart. "Talk to him," she said kindly. "Even unconscious, patients can often hear familiar voices. It helps them find their way back." I pulled up a chair and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines. His hand was cold. "Hey, Danny," I said, using the childhood nickname he'd outgrown decades ago. "It's Maggie, your annoying little sister who never knew when to give up." I tried to laugh, but it came out as more of a sob. "You scared us. You scared your kids half to death. Vanessa, too." I paused, not sure what else to say. So much hurt between us, so many words unsaid. "I bought the tailor shop," I told him. "Mr. Goldstein retired, and I bought his business." Can you believe that? Me, running my own company. I even got featured in a magazine. You'd probably say it's just a small business in Queens. Nothing compared to your corporate success, but Danny, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what I've built. The machines beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. "Emma and Jacob are here," I continued. "They're so scared. They need their dad. They need you to wake up and be okay," my voice cracked. "I need you to wake up, Danny. I know we haven't been speaking. I know you think I'm a failure, a bad influence, whatever. But you're still my brother. You're still the kid who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and told me I could do anything I set my mind to. Remember that? Before the money and the fancy house and the corporate job? Remember when we were just Danny and Maggie and that was enough?" I sat with him until the nurse told me my time was up. As I stood to leave, I squeezed his hand. "Fight, Danny. Your family needs you. And whether you believe it or not, I need you too." The next 2 days were a blur of hospital waiting rooms, terrible coffee, and taking turns sitting with Daniel. Vanessa had to handle his work obligations. His assistant came by with urgent documents that needed attention. Emma and Jacob missed school, too worried to focus on anything else. I closed the shop, something I never did, and stayed at the hospital with them. We were an odd little family unit, camped out in that waiting room. I braided Emma's hair. I played card games with Jacob. I brought real food from the deli down the street because hospital cafeteria meals were depressing. Vanessa and I had long, quiet conversations about everything and nothing. Her childhood, my childhood, the choices we'd made, the regrets we carried. "Daniel almost died," she said on the second night, staring at her cold coffee. And all I could think was, what if he died and I'd kept his children from someone who loves them? What if Emma and Jacob had to grow up without him and also without you, because I was too proud and stupid to admit I was wrong? "You weren't stupid," I said. "Misguided, maybe, but not stupid." "I was a snob," she said bluntly. "I am a snob. I look at people and immediately calculate their net worth, their social status, their potential usefulness. It's ugly and it's wrong, and I don't know how to stop doing it." "Maybe you start by recognizing it," I suggested. "That's the first step, right? Self-awareness?" She laughed bitterly. "You know what's funny? My own mother was a waitress. My dad worked construction. I spent my whole childhood in a tiny apartment, wearing hand-me-downs, qualifying for free lunch at school. Then I met Daniel, and he was so ambitious, so determined to make something of himself. I saw a way out, a way to never be poor again, and I became exactly the kind of person who would have looked down on my own parents. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just sat with her in her guilt and her recognition. Sometimes that's all you can do. On the third day, Daniel woke up. Emma was sitting with him when it happened. She came running out to the waiting room, crying and laughing at the same time. He opened his eyes. He said my name. We all rushed to the door, but the nurses held us back while they checked him over. Finally, they allowed Vanessa in, and then, surprisingly, they called for me. Daniel was propped up slightly, still pale and weak, but conscious and alert. He looked at me as I approached, and his eyes filled with tears. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You came." "Of course I came, you idiot." I tried to sound angry, but it came out tender. "You're my brother." He reached for my hand. "I'm sorry. God, Maggie, I'm so sorry. For everything. For what I said, for keeping you away from the kids, for being such an asshole. Danny, no, let me say this. I might not get another chance." He took a shaky breath. "When I was lying in that office, feeling like an elephant was sitting on my chest, All I could think about was how stupid I'd been. How I'd pushed away the people who mattered because I was too busy chasing things that don't matter. Money, status, the right zip code, the right schools. And for what? I almost died, Maggie. I almost left my kids without a father. And one of my last conscious thoughts was that I'd also made sure they didn't have you. How screwed up is that? I was crying now, too. You didn't know you were going to have a heart attack. You couldn't have known. That's not the point. The point is, I should have valued you while I had the chance, while we both had time. He squeezed my hand weakly. Vanessa told me about your business, about the magazine article, about everything you've accomplished this year. I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I have to say it now while I can. You're talented, you're kind, you're exactly the kind of person I want Emma and Jacob to look up to. I was wrong, Maggie, about everything. If you're watching this and you've ever needed to hear someone say, I was wrong, please know how powerful those words can be. And if there's someone in your life you need to say them to, don't wait. Don't assume you'll have time later. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Daniel's recovery was slow and difficult. The heart attack had been serious, requiring lifestyle changes that were hard for someone who'd built his identity around high-stress corporate success. He had to take medical leave from work, had to cut back on travel and long hours, had to learn to delegate and let go of control. It was perhaps the best thing that ever happened to him. In those first weeks after he came home from the hospital, I visited every few days, at first just for an hour or so, then longer as he grew stronger. Emma and Jacob were always happy to see me, and Vanessa, to her credit, made me feel welcome. One afternoon in November, I arrived to find Daniel sitting in his home office, staring at his computer with a frustrated expression. What's wrong? I asked. He sighed. I'm supposed to be working reduced hours, but I'm going crazy. I'm not good at sitting still. I'm not good at not being productive. Who says you're not being productive? I challenged. You're healing. That's productive. You're spending time with your kids. That's productive. You're learning to slow down before stress literally kills you. That's pretty damn productive, he smiled wryly. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Well, several good teachers. People who saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Tell me about your business. Really tell me. I want to understand what you've built. So I told him everything. About Mr. Goldstein's mentorship, about Mrs. Rodriguez's wisdom, about the Instagram account and the magazine article and the classes I was teaching. I told him about Patricia's wedding dress and Sandra the divorcee and all the people whose lives I'd touched in small but meaningful ways. You're not just running a tailor shop, he said when I finished. You're building a community. You're providing a service that actually matters to people on a personal level. That's actually really impressive. It's not corporate success, I said, watching his face carefully. So what? Corporate success got me a heart attack at 49 and almost left my kids without a father. Your success actually means something. It's built on relationships and craftsmanship and helping people feel confident and beautiful. How is that not valuable? Hearing him say it, really believe it, not just as an apology but as a genuine recognition, was more healing than I'd expected. I want to invest in your business, he said suddenly. I laughed. Daniel, no, that's not why I'm telling you this. I know. But hear me out. You said you want to expand, maybe open a second location, or invest in better equipment. I have capital sitting around in investment accounts. Let me invest in something that actually matters. Let me be part of something good. I don't know. Think about it, he said. Not as charity, not as a handout, but as a genuine business investment. You draft a proposal, show me your numbers, and we'll talk like real business people. Equal partners. The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Thanksgiving that year was different from any I'd ever experienced. Vanessa insisted on hosting. No arguments, Maggie, your family. And for the first time in over a year, I sat at their dining room table. But the dynamics had shifted. Instead of being the poor relative who was tolerated, I was there as an equal. Emma sat beside me, showing me sketches she'd been working on, fashion designs inspired by my work. Jacob kept asking questions about how different sewing machines worked because he wanted to build a robot for his science fair and thought the mechanics might be similar. Daniel, still recovering but looking better each day, watched all this with a soft smile. Vanessa had cooked most of the meal. Herself, a change from the catered affairs she usually arranged, and there was something warm and imperfect about the slightly burned rolls and the lumpy gravy. "I want to make a toast," Daniel said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, no alcohol, doctor's orders. "To second chances, to family, and to my sister, who showed me that success isn't about the size of your paycheck or your job title. It's about the lives you touch and the integrity with which you live." We all raised our glasses. Emma added, "And to Aunt Maggie, who never gave up on us, even when we gave up on her." I had to excuse myself and cry in the bathroom for a minute. Happy tears this time, but overwhelming nonetheless. After dinner, while the kids were playing a board game and Daniel was napping on the couch, Vanessa pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, leading me to her home office. She opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. "Emma's been writing in a journal about you. She started it right after that night Daniel told you to stay away. She wrote to you like letters, telling you about her day, about what she was thinking and feeling. She wanted you to know that she hadn't forgotten you, even if she couldn't see you." She handed me the journal, a purple notebook covered in stickers. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Aunt Maggie," the first entry read, dated last October. "Today Dad said you can't visit anymore. I don't understand why. You're the only one who listens to me about my art and my ideas. Mom and Dad just want me to get good grades and get into a good college. But you ask me about my dreams. I miss you already." I flipped through the pages, reading entry after entry. Emma wrote about her struggles at school, her fights with Jacob, her confusion about why I'd been banished. She wrote about seeing the article about me in the magazine. Apparently Vanessa's mother had seen it and mentioned it, not knowing about the family rift. Aunt Maggie started her own business. One entry read, "She looks so happy in the pictures. I wish I could tell her I'm proud of her. I wish I could tell her that when I grow up, I want to be brave like her." I couldn't stop crying. Vanessa stood awkwardly beside me, clearly uncomfortable, but not leaving. "I didn't know she was writing these," Vanessa said quietly. "I found the journal a few weeks ago when I was cleaning her room. She gave me permission to show you. She said you should know that you were never forgotten." "Thank you," I managed to say, "for showing me this, for everything." "I can't undo the last year," Vanessa said. "I can't give back the time we stole from you and the kids. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. Your family, Maggie. Real family. Not the kind you tolerate at holidays, but the kind you celebrate every day." December brought the busy holiday season, and the shop was overwhelmed with orders. Party dress alterations, gift commissions, costume repairs for Christmas pageants. I hired 2 additional seamstresses temporarily just to keep up with demand, which made me realize I actually could sustain more employees if I expanded properly. I spent my evenings working on the business proposal Daniel had requested. It was harder than I'd expected, translating my creative vision into numbers and projections and market analysis. But I discovered I was good at it, or at least competent enough. And more importantly, I was passionate about it. This wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something meaningful and sustainable. My proposal included plans for expanding the current shop space by taking over the adjacent vacant storefront too, hiring 3 full-time employees and 2 part-time assistants, 3, establishing a formal training Program for aspiring tailors and seamstresses. 4. Creating a small production. Line for my own designs, nothing mass-produced, but small batch items that could be sold online and in local boutiques. 5. Developing a mentorship program for young people interested in textile arts. I presented it to Daniel 2 weeks before Christmas. Nervous as I'd ever been. He read through every page carefully, asking questions, challenging my assumptions, pushing me to think bigger in some areas and more realistically in others. "This is good," he finally said. "Really good. Your numbers are conservative but reasonable. Your vision is clear. And this mentorship program," he tapped the page. "This is brilliant. Teaching the next generation. Creating opportunities for people who might not otherwise have them. That's legacy, Maggie. That's what matters. So you'll invest?" "I'll invest on one condition. You let me be actively involved, at least in an advisory capacity. I need something meaningful to do with my time now that I can't work 90-hour weeks anymore. And I think I could learn a lot from how you run a business, focusing on people, not just profits." We shook hands, then hugged. My brother, the one who'd told me to stay out of his children's lives, who'd called me a failure and an embarrassment, was now my business partner and biggest supporter. For everyone watching this, I want you to understand something crucial. People can change. Situations can transform. The story you're living right now isn't necessarily the story you'll be living a year from now. Don't give up. Please subscribe to this channel for more stories of hope and transformation, and let me know in the comments what dreams you're pursuing right now. The first 6 months of the expansion were chaotic. We broke through walls, installed new equipment, hired staff, launched the website, started the mentorship program. Daniel threw himself into it with the same intensity he'd once reserved for corporate mergers, but this time it was different. This time he worked with joy instead of stress, collaboration instead of competition. Emma joined the first youth mentorship cohort, 10 teenagers from local schools who wanted to learn textile arts. She soaked up everything like a sponge, her natural artistic talent combining with technical skills to create stunning work. Jacob, not to be outdone, appointed himself the shop's technology officer, creating Instagram content and managing our online presence with the fluency of a digital native. Mrs. Rodriguez became a fixture at the shop, teaching crochet and knitting classes. Mrs. Chen started a specialized program in Asian textile techniques. Carlos led workshops in embroidery. We became more than a business. We became a community center for fiber arts. The magazine did a follow-up feature titled, "1 Year Later, Sullivan's Stitchery Thrives." They interviewed not just me, but also Emma, Jacob, some of the students in our program, and several clients whose lives we'd touched. One client, a transgender woman named Melissa, spoke about how I'd helped her alter her entire wardrobe as she transitioned, treating her with dignity and respect when other tailors had refused to work with her. "Maggie didn't just alter my clothes," she said in the interview. "She helped me step into my authentic self. She saw me as the woman I was becoming, not the person everyone thought I should be." Another client, an elderly man named George, talked about how I'd helped him make a memory quilt from his late wife's clothing. "Every stitch held a memory," he said. "Maggie understood that this wasn't just about fabric. It was about keeping my wife close to my heart." These stories, the lives we touched, the moments we made meaningful, became the true measure of our success. Mother's Day in May brought an unexpected gift. Emma had been working on a secret project for weeks, staying late at the shop with Mrs. Chen's help. When she finally revealed it, I cried. She'd created a dress for me, a beautiful, sophisticated sheath dress in deep blue with delicate hand-embroidered flowers along the neckline. The embroidery technique was one I'd taught her, but she'd elevated it, made it her own. "I know you're not my mother," Emma said as she presented it to me. "But you've been like a second mom to me. You believe in me in ways that are different from how Mom and Dad believe in me. They want me to be successful by their definition. You want me to be happy by mine. That matters. You matter." I wore that dress to the small Mother's Day brunch Vanessa organized. She'd invited Mrs. Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen, and several other women who'd been maternal figures in my life. It was intimate and lovely, and I felt surrounded by love in a way I never had before. "You know what's funny?" Vanessa said to me quietly while the others chatted. "I spent years trying to be the perfect mother, the right activities, the right schools, the right everything. But it was you, working in a tailor shop, who taught my daughter what really matters. Authenticity, kindness, resilience. Thank you for that." "She's an amazing kid," I said. "You should be proud." "I am. But I'm also learning to let her define her own version of amazing." She paused. "I'm learning that from you." In June, I had my own health scare, a lump in my breast that required a biopsy. The waiting period for results was agonizing, filled with dark thoughts about mortality and unfinished business. It turned out to be benign, just a cyst, but the experience shifted something in me. I started thinking about legacy, about what I wanted to leave behind. The business would continue without me. I'd built a strong team, established good systems. But what else? What mark did I want to make on the world? I decided to write my story. Not for publication necessarily, but to document the journey from rock bottom to redemption, from rejection to renewal. I wanted Emma and Jacob and the students in our mentorship program to know that failure isn't final, that people's opinions of you don't define your worth, that you can rebuild your life at any age. I started recording voice memos on my phone during my commute, jotting down memories and lessons learned. Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter, Maria, who'd helped me with my Instagram, suggested I turn it into a YouTube channel. "People need these stories, Aunt Maggie," she said. She'd started calling me Aunt Maggie, too, adopting me as honorary family. "People need to know they're not alone, that transformation is possible. Your story could help so many people." So I started recording videos, just me, talking to a camera, sharing my journey. Nothing fancy, nothing scripted, just honest accounts of struggle and growth. The first video I posted was titled, "My Brother Told Me to Stay Out of His Kids' Lives." I told the whole story. From that devastating conversation in Daniel's kitchen to the emergency call that changed everything. I was vulnerable and raw, not trying to paint myself as a hero, just as a human who'd been broken and found a way to heal. And that's how you found me. That's why you're watching this right now. If this story has touched you, if you see yourself in any part of my journey, please subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what challenges you're facing. We're all in this together. I didn't expect much from that first video, maybe a few hundred views from people who stumbled across it. What I got was overwhelming. The video went viral, not in a massive millions of views way, but in a meaningful, lives-changed way. Within a week, it had 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of family rejection, career struggles, late-life transformations. A woman named Patricia, not the bride, a different Patricia, wrote, "I'm 62 years old and just got laid off from a job I'd had for 30 years. I felt like my life was over. Your story gave me hope that maybe it's not an ending, but a beginning." A man named Robert commented, "My son told me he was ashamed of me because I work as a custodian. Your story reminded me that honest work is nothing to be ashamed of. Thank you." A young woman named Ashley wrote, "I dropped out of college to pursue cosmetology, and my parents haven't spoken to me in 2 years. They say I'm throwing my life away. Your story helps me believe I'm not." Each comment was a reminder that pain is universal, but so is resilience. So is hope. The channel grew steadily. I posted new videos weekly. some about my business journey, some about specific life lessons, some featuring the people in my life like Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Goldstein, before he passed away peacefully that summer at age 81. Each video was another thread in the tapestry of my story, another connection to people out there who needed to hear that they weren't alone. Daniel watched every video. "I can't believe you're being so public about everything," he said one day, "including the stuff about me. Does it bother you?" I asked. He thought about it. "No, actually. It's the truth. I was awful to you. If sharing that story helps other people, then maybe some good comes from my mistakes. That's more than I deserve." Everyone deserves redemption, Danny, even you. In August, I received an email that stopped me in my tracks. It was from a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, a professor of textile arts at a prestigious design school in Manhattan. She'd seen my videos and wanted to discuss a potential collaboration, having me come in as a guest lecturer and possibly developing a continuing education program for adult learners who wanted to enter the textile arts field. Your approach to teaching, combining technical skill with emotional support and community building, is exactly what the field needs, she wrote. Would you be interested in discussing this further? Would I be interested? The girl who'd dropped out of college, who'd been called a failure, who'd been deemed unworthy of being around her own niece and nephew, that girl was being invited to teach at a prestigious design school. I said yes. The first lecture I gave was in September, almost 2 years to the day after Daniel had banished me from his children's lives. The room was packed, not just with enrolled students, but with people from all walks of life who'd registered for the one-night workshop. Emma and Jacob came, sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Daniel and Vanessa came too, standing in the back, watching. I talked about the technical aspects of pattern making and design, but I also talked about the emotional aspects, how creating with your hands can be healing, how learning a skill can rebuild confidence, how finding your authentic path matters more than following someone else's map. During the Q&A, a young woman in her 20s raised her hand. "My family says I'm wasting my potential by wanting to work in fashion. They want me to be a doctor or lawyer. How did you handle that pressure?" I looked at Daniel in the back of the room. He nodded at me, giving me permission to tell the truth. "I lost people I loved for a while," I said honestly. "I had to learn that their disappointment in my choices was about their fears, not about my worth." It took hitting rock bottom and climbing back up to understand that you can't live your life trying to meet someone else's expectations. You'll fail every time because their expectations will keep changing. The only expectations that matter are the ones you set for yourself based on your own values and your own vision of a meaningful life. The young woman had tears in her eyes. "But what if they never accept your choices?" "Then you learn to accept your choices enough for all of you," I said. "And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, when they see you thriving in your authentic path, they come around. But you can't wait for their approval to start living. Start now. Start today. Build the life you want, one stitch at a time." The room erupted in applause. After the lecture, as people filed out, Daniel approached me. "That was incredible," he said. "Watching you up there, so confident and knowledgeable and passionate. I'm in awe of you, Maggie, truly." "Took us a long detour to get here," I said. "But we got here. That's what matters." As we enter the 3rd year since that terrible night in Daniel's kitchen and the miraculous night of his emergency, I find myself reflecting on everything that's changed. The business is thriving. We've expanded again, taking over a 2nd location in Brooklyn. We employ 15 people full-time now, and our mentorship program has graduated over 50 students, many of whom have gone on to successful careers in textile arts or related fields. My YouTube channel has grown to over 100,000 subscribers. I receive messages daily from people around the world who've been touched by my story, who've found courage to pursue their own dreams or reconcile with their own families or simply get up and try again after a devastating setback. Emma is now 15 and has already decided she wants to study fashion design in college. But more importantly, she wants to do it ethically and sustainably, creating clothes that are beautiful and meaningful rather than just trendy and disposable. She volunteers at the shop every weekend, teaching younger kids in the mentorship program. Jacob, at 13, has discovered he loves the business side of things. He's created a whole marketing strategy for our online store and is constantly coming up with ideas for expansion and innovation. He reminds me of his father, but without the fear and insecurity that drove Daniel to cruel decisions. Daniel himself has undergone the most remarkable transformation. He took early retirement from his corporate position and now works with me full-time at the business. He handles the financial and administrative side, freeing me to focus on the creative and teaching aspects. But more than that, he's become a mentor to young people who come from backgrounds similar to his, kids from poor families who are driven by fear of returning to poverty. He helps them understand that ambition doesn't have to come from fear, that success doesn't require sacrificing your humanity. I was so terrified of being poor again that I couldn't see anything else, he told a group of students recently. I measured everyone and everything by financial success, including my own sister. And I almost died without ever understanding what actually matters. Don't make my mistake. Build success, yes, but build it on a foundation of values, not fear. Vanessa has changed too, though more quietly. She volunteers at a shelter for domestic violence survivors, using her organizational skills to help women rebuild their lives. She's taken sewing classes from me and now helps teach basic mending and alteration skills to shelter residents, giving them practical tools for self-sufficiency. I spent so long looking down on practical skills. Oh, she told me once while we worked side by side. I didn't understand that these skills are what actually save people. Not fancy degrees or impressive job titles, but the ability to create something, fix something, make something useful with your own hands. You knew that all along. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Mrs. Rodriguez is still my neighbor and my greatest cheerleader. She's now 82 and her arthritis makes crocheting difficult, but she comes to the shop every day anyway, just to be part of the community we've built. I'm so proud of you, Mija, she tells me regularly. You took your pain and turned it into purpose. That's the real success story.